We spend our lives running. We chase the next promotion, the next relationship, the next financial milestone, hoping that once we finally arrive, the quiet, persistent hum of anxiety in the back of our minds will shut off. Siddhartha Gautama approached this specific anxiety with clinical precision. History remembers him as a religious icon, but his primary work focused on the practical mechanics of the human condition. He illustrated our situation with the parable of a man struck in the chest by a poisoned arrow. When a doctor arrived to save his life, the dying man refused treatment. He demanded to know exactly who shot the arrow, what kind of wood the shaft was made of, and why he was targeted. He would not let the doctor pull it out until he had his answers. We mirror this behavior when we demand to know the ultimate meaning of the universe or the secrets of the afterlife, while we are actively bleeding out from stress and existential dread. We obsess over metaphysical questions while our psychological wounds remain open. A dying man requires immediate surgery, not a history lesson. Engaging in abstract philosophy to solve existential pain is a distraction that allows the poison to continue its work. To stop that bleeding, we have to look at how we project value. We operate under a cognitive delusion that joy physically resides inside external objects. We treat wealth, or our social status, or a new car, as if they are the containers of happiness itself. Consider a dog chewing on a dry, marrowless bone. As the hard bone cuts the dog's gums, the dog begins to bleed. It tastes the blood and finds it delicious, believing the flavor is coming from the bone itself. This is the mechanism of projection. We look at a lifeless object and attribute our own internal capacity for joy to it. The bone is just a bone. We are the ones providing the flavor. This projection makes our chronic dissatisfaction inevitable. Because the joy was never actually inside the object, the satisfaction vanishes the moment we acquire it. The projection stops, and the empty object can no longer sustain the illusion. Searching for happiness outside of our own minds guarantees a life of frustration. We are caught in an endless cycle of chasing dry bones, always wondering why the taste never lasts. This psychological interpretation, championed by thinkers like Osho, frames the Buddha as history's first clinical psychologist. His teachings function as a diagnostic manual for a brain that has lost its way. He identified the mind itself as the primary disease, specifically our ego, our constant state of desiring, and our inability to inhabit the present moment. Traditional religions often try to manage this by imposing rigid external moral rules. They attempt to fix the person by dictating their diet, their dress, and their social behavior. The limits of these rules are clear in the story of the strict monk who vowed never to touch meat. As he walked with his begging bowl, an eagle overhead dropped a piece of scavenged meat directly into his dish. Life is chaotic and indifferent to our dogma. It will eventually drop something into your bowl that breaks your rules. External discipline often creates a layer of hypocrisy over a suffering soul. Without internal awareness, following a code of conduct is just a performance that leaves the underlying disease of the mind untouched. The Buddha's singular antidote for this mental disease is hush, a state of radical, active wakefulness. In daily life, hush looks like absolute focus. If you are walking down a street, your entire consciousness is anchored to the 4 steps immediately in front of you. You observe the sensation of the ground and the movement of your breath. This hyperfocus functions as an anchoring mechanism. It grounds the consciousness in physical reality, which denies the mind the space it needs to manufacture anxieties about a hypothetical future or a painful past. A mind dependent on rules is fragile and easily shaken by a change in circumstances. A state of true awareness is like a Himalayan peak, solid and unbothered while the storms of desire blow past. Psychological freedom comes from mastering this internal, observant awareness. No amount of external law can replicate the clarity and stability of a mind that has learned to stay awake. Visualize the agitated mind as a rippling lake. Every desire and every future projection acts like a gust of wind. These ripples shatter your perception of reality, distorting the world just as the waves break the reflection of the moon into unreadable shards. When mindfulness is applied, the ripples cease. The mind becomes a perfect mirror, reflecting reality exactly as it is, without our hopes or fears. This clarity is often mistaken for monastic isolation or the cold suppression of human experience. In practice, the objective is to engage deeply with the world, to work, to love, and to participate in the material experience, while remaining completely awake at the wheel. Anxiety requires the fuel of time, the dread of what might happen, or the shame of what already did. By anchoring the mind to the immediate physical present, that fuel source is cut off. The existential bleeding stops because the mind is no longer wandering into the territories where pain is manufactured. Peace is simply the natural state that remains once the frantic search for meaning shuts down.